Clara wasn't okay. She was terrified and furious and sick with the knowledge of how close they'd come. "I'm okay." Kate knelt beside them, her expression softening. "You must be Clara. Nate's told me about you. He has. Says you're the bravest person he's ever met." Kate helped her to her feet. "I'm starting to see why." The other children had crept downstairs. Tommy crying softly. Sam pale as death. Josie clutching her book like a shield. "What's going to happen?" Josie asked, her voice small. "Are they going to take us away?" "Not if I have anything to say about it." Kate's jaw set. "Let's get word to Nate, then we'll figure out our next move." Nate came home like a storm made flesh. Clara heard the horse before she saw it, hooves pounding frozen ground coming fast. Then the front door crashed open, and Nate was there, wild-eyed, breathing hard. "Where are they?" His voice was barely human. "I'll kill them. I'll kill them all." "They're gone." Kate stepped forward, hands raised. Nate, look at me. The children are safe. Everyone's okay." He put his hands on her. Nate's gaze found the bruise already forming on her arm. "He put his hands on my daughter." My daughter. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "I'm fine," she managed. "Emmy scared them off with a knife." Nate looked at Emmy, something flickering across his face, pride maybe, or fear. "Show me the court order," he said, his voice still tight with barely controlled rage. He took it with him, but he said it was from Judge Whitfield in Helena. Whitfield. Nate's jaw clenched. That snake oil charlatan? Cutter must have bribed him. "Can he do that?" Sam asked. "Can a judge just take us away?" Nate knelt down, bringing himself to Sam's eye level. "Listen to me, all of you." He waited until 5 pairs of eyes were fixed on him. "Nobody is taking you anywhere. I don't care what papers they wave or what judges they've bought. You're my family. I will fight for you with everything I have." "But what if you lose?" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. Nate's expression softened. "Then I'll keep fighting. And when I'm done fighting, I'll find another way. I'm not giving up on you. Not ever. Do you understand?" Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Good." Nate stood, turned to Kate. "I need to get to Helena. Talk to a real judge. Get this thrown out. In this weather, the passes are barely open." "I don't care." "Nate." Kate gripped his arm. "Think. If you leave now, you leave these children unprotected. Cutter could come back with more men, more legal papers, more. Then what do you suggest? Send Dan to Helena. He knows the territory better than anyone. You stay here, protect your family, and we'll gather support from the town." "The town," Nate laughed bitterly. "The town that's been calling me crazy for taking in 5 orphans. The town that crosses the street to avoid us." "Not everyone." Kate's voice was firm. "There are good people here, Nate. People who remember what it's like to need help and not get it. Let me talk to them." Clara watched the exchange, her mind racing. Kate Mercer spoke to Nate like an equal, challenged him without fear. And the way he looked at her. "Fine." Nate ran a hand through his hair. "Dan goes to Helena tomorrow. You work on the town, and You stay with your children," Kate finished. "Where you belong." After Kate left, Nate gathered them all in the parlor. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Mrs. Whitmore brought hot chocolate, a luxury Clara had never tasted before coming here, and they sat in a circle like a war council of children and one battered rancher. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened," Nate said. "Every detail. Leave nothing out." Clara told it. The arrival cutter's words, the court order, the man grabbing her arm. She told it flat and factual, the way you reported battlefield casualties. When she got to Emmy and the knife, Nate turned to the youngest girl. "Emmy, is it true what you said about the man at the orphanage?" Emmy nodded once. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Who would I tell?" Emmy's voice was soft. "Nobody believed orphans. We were just things, to be used however people wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry," Nate's voice cracked. "I'm sorry that happened to you. All of you. You deserved better." "It's not your fault," Clara said. "No, but I can make sure it never happens again." He looked at each of them in turn. "From now on, nobody goes anywhere alone. We stay together, watch out for each other. If Cutter or anyone else comes here again, you run, hide, make noise, whatever it takes to survive until help comes." "What if help doesn't come?" Sam asked. "Help will always come." Nate's voice was fierce. "Because I will always come, no matter what. Do you believe me?" Sam looked at Clara. Clara looked at Emmy. Emmy looked at Josie. Josie looked at Tommy. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that only children who'd survived together could share. "We believe you," Clara said finally. "But we're not running anymore. We're done being scared. If they want to take us, they'll have to fight all of us." Nate stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "All right then. We fight together." The next week was a blur of preparation. Dan rode for Helena the morning after the attack, carrying letters from Nate to every judge, lawyer, and official who might listen. Kate Mercer made good on her promise, going door to door in town, speaking to anyone who would listen about what Cutter had done. The response surprised everyone. It started with small things. A pie left on the porch, no note attached. A bundle of warm clothes appearing by the gate. Then, people started coming in person. Farmers, shopkeepers, even the school teacher who Clara had assumed hated them. "I heard what happened," Miss Patterson said, standing awkwardly in the Harlan parlor with a basket of books. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in town agrees with Reverend Cutter." "Could have fooled me," Clara muttered. "Clara," Nate warned. "No, she's right." Miss Patterson's face reddened. "We haven't been welcoming. We've gossiped and judged and made assumptions based on nothing but our own small-mindedness." She set the basket down. "I'm sorry. These are for the children, to help with their studies." After she left, Josie pounced on the books like they were made of gold. Sam examined them more cautiously, and Tommy immediately lost interest. But Emmy picked one up, a volume of frontier history, and began reading intently. "Why are they being nice now?" Josie asked, not looking up from a collection of fairy tales. "Because they finally saw what Cutter really is," Nate said. "What is he really? A man who cares more about power than people." Nate sat down heavily. "He's been trying to control this town for years. The orphan placements are just part of it. He gets money from the church for every child he places. The worse the placement, the more desperate families become, the more they donate. So we're just profit to him." "You were. Not anymore." Clara watched Nate's face, saw the exhaustion there. He'd barely slept since the attack, patrolling the property at night, checking locks and windows, jumping at every sound. "You should rest," she said. "I'll rest when I know you're safe." "We're never going to be completely safe. That's not how the world works." Nate looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "When did you get so wise?" "When life stopped giving me any other choice." He didn't have an answer for that. The court date came faster than expected. Dan returned from Helena with news Judge Crane, a circuit judge known for his fairness, had agreed to hear the case. Cutter's original order from Judge Whitfield had been suspended pending review. They had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to gather evidence, 2 weeks to find witnesses, 2 weeks to prove that 5 broken children were better off with a broken rancher than in the hands of a corrupt preacher. "It's not enough time," Nate said, pacing the parlor. Kate had come over to help strategize. "Cutter's had months to prepare. He's got money connections, the church behind him." "And what do you have?" Kate asked. 5 kids and a ranch." "You have more than that." Kate caught his arm, stopped his pacing. "You have the truth. You have people who've seen what you've done for these children. And you have me." Something passed between them. Clara, watching from the doorway, felt like an intruder. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Kate's voice was firm. "I've watched you, Nate. Watched you transform from the loneliest man in Wyoming into someone who has something to live for. These children did that. You did that. I'm not going to let some greedy preacher destroy it." Nate was silent for a long moment. Then he took Kate's hand, held it gently. "Thank you." Clara slipped away before they noticed her. She had her own preparations to make. She found Emmy in the barn, sitting with the gray horse that had become her refuge. "I need to talk to you," Clara said. Emmy didn't look up. "About the trial. About what you said. When Cutter came. About the man at the orphanage." Emmy's hands stilled on the horse's mane. "They're going to ask about our past," Clara continued. "About what happened to us before. If you testify, I'll tell them everything. Are you sure it'll be hard? They'll make you say it in front of strangers. They might not believe you." Emmy finally looked up. Her gray eyes were ancient, far too old for her 6-year-old face. "Clara, I've been not believed my whole life. One more time won't break me." She paused. "Will you be there when I tell it? I'll be right beside you, the whole time." Emmy nodded once. Then she went back to brushing the horse, and Clara left her to her silence. The night before the trial, Clara couldn't sleep. She crept downstairs, expecting to find the house dark and quiet. Instead, she found Nate at the kitchen table, a single candle burning, papers spread before him. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." She sat down across from him. "What are you reading?" "Testimonials. Kate collected them from people in town." He pushed a stack toward her. "Read them." Clara picked up the first letter, then the second, then the third. They were stories. Stories about Nate, how he'd helped a farmer rebuild after a fire, given extra pay to workers during hard winters, quietly paid medical bills for families who couldn't afford them. "I didn't know you did any of this," Clara said. "Wasn't for show. Just seemed like the right thing to do. These could help. Maybe." Nate gathered the letters. "But it's not really about me. It's about you kids. Whether you're better off here or somewhere else. We're better off here. The judge might not see it that way. A bachelor with no experience, no wife, no proper family structure." "Family isn't about structure." Clara's voice was fierce. "Family is about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you even when it's hard." Nate looked at her for a long moment. "When did you start believing that?" Clara thought about the question. When had she stopped waiting for disappointment? When had she started trusting this strange, sad man who'd bought 5 orphans and tried so hard to learn how to love them? "I don't know," she admitted. "Somewhere between Tommy's nightmares and Emmy's knife and you saying my daughter, like it was the most natural thing in the world." "I meant it." "I know." Clara reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. "That's why we're going to win tomorrow. Because you mean it. Because you chose us when you didn't have to. Because for the first time in my life, I believe someone when they say they won't give up." Nate's eyes glistened in the candlelight. "Clara May Dawson," he said quietly, "you are the strongest person I've ever known." "I had to be, but maybe—" She paused, searching for words. "Maybe now I can learn how to be something else too. Something softer, because I finally have someone to catch me if I fall." They sat in silence as the candle burned down 2 broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives. Tomorrow would bring the fight of their lives, but tonight they had each other. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold fear. Clara sat on a bench behind Nate, her siblings pressed close on either side. Tommy had refused to let go of her hand since they'd arrived. Sam was pale and silent. Josie kept her eyes fixed on the floor. And Emmy. Emmy watched everything with those gray eyes, cataloging exits, counting enemies, preparing for the worst. Judge Elijah Crane took his seat at the front of the room, his face revealing nothing. He was older than Clara had expected, with silver hair and deep lines carved by decades of hard decisions. His eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in every face, every tension, every unspoken word. This court is now in session. His voice was quiet, but carried. The matter before us is the custody of 5 minor children currently residing with Mr. Nathaniel Harlan. Reverend Jonas Cutter has petitioned to have these children removed and placed in church custody pending adoption. Mr. Harlan contests this petition. Cutter sat at one table, flanked by a lawyer in an expensive suit. He looked calm, confident, righteous. The kind of man who believed God was on his side and acted accordingly. Nate sat at the other table alone. He'd refused to hire a lawyer, said he couldn't afford to put his trust in someone else's words. Kate Mercer sat in the gallery, along with Miss Patterson, Margaret Brennan, and a dozen other townspeople who'd come to show support. It wasn't enough. Clara knew it wasn't enough. "Reverend Cutter," Judge Crane said, "you may present your case." Cutter stood smoothing his black coat. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of propriety and child welfare. Mr. Harlan, while wealthy, is a bachelor with no experience raising children. He lives alone on a remote ranch with no wife, no female presence to guide young girls through the complexities of womanhood." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Furthermore, Mr. Harlan acquired these children through unorthodox means. He paid $250 at a public placement fair, essentially purchasing them like livestock. This is not adoption. This is commerce. And commerce has no place in the sacred responsibility of raising children." Clara's hands clenched into fists. Tommy whimpered beside her. "The church offers these children structure, education, moral guidance. We have facilities designed specifically for orphaned youth. We have trained staff who understand their needs." Cutter's voice oozed sincerity. "Mr. Harlan, whatever his intentions, simply cannot provide what these children require." Judge Crane nodded slowly. "Mr. Harlan, your response." Nate stood. His hands were steady, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing. When I stepped onto that platform 3 weeks ago, I didn't have a plan. I saw 5 children being torn apart by strangers who wanted to use them, and I couldn't walk away." He paused, gathering himself. "The Reverend is right that I'm a bachelor. Right that I live alone. Right that I paid money to take these children home. But he's wrong about what that means." "Explain." "I didn't buy these children, Your Honor. I bought their freedom. Freedom from being separated, sold off to different families who saw them as cheap labor instead of human beings. Freedom from a system that treats orphans like merchandise." Nate's voice hardened. "I've seen what happens to children placed through the Reverend's program. Worked to death on farms, beaten for small mistakes. Worse things that I won't speak aloud in mixed company." Cutter shot to his feet. "Objection. These are baseless accusations." "Sit down, Reverend." Judge Crane's voice was ice. "You'll have your chance to respond." Mr. Harlan continue. "I don't have a wife," Nate admitted, "but I have Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, who's helped run my household for 15 years and has raised 3 children of her own. I have Kate Mercer, my neighbor, who's been visiting daily to help with the children's education. I have an entire community," he gestured at the gallery, "who've come forward to support these children despite the Reverend's attempts to turn them against us." He turned to look at Clara and her siblings. "And I have 5 of the bravest, strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. They don't need me to save them. They've already saved themselves 100 times over. All I'm doing is giving them a safe place to keep doing it." Judge Crane was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I'd like to hear from the children." Clara's heart stopped. "Your Honor," Cutter interjected. "Surely you can't expect to take the word of children over, 'I can and I will.'" The judge's gaze was sharp. "These are the people whose lives we're deciding. They have a right to speak." He looked at Clara. "You're the oldest. Clara Mae Dawson, is that correct?" Clara stood on shaking legs. "Yes, sir." "Come forward." She walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling every eye on her. Nate gave her a small nod as she passed Trust, Encouragement, Faith. She sat in the witness chair, her hands clasped tight in her lap. "Miss Dawson," Judge Crane said, "tell me about your life before Mr. Harlan." Clara swallowed. "I had parents once. My father worked in a printing factory in Boston. My mother was a seamstress. They were good people, kind people. What happened to them? My father got caught in a machine. It crushed his arm and the infection killed him 2 weeks later." Clara's voice stayed flat, controlled. "My mother couldn't work enough to support us alone. She got sick. The fever took her 6 months after Papa. And then, St. Catherine's Orphanage. 2 years of sharing a bed with 3 other girls, eating food that was more water than substance, being told every day that we were burdens. Charity cases. Lucky to be alive." Judge Crane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then the train brought us west. They told us we'd find families, good homes. Instead, we found auctions where farmers poked at us like cattle, and Reverend Cutter—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "Reverend Cutter told us to be grateful anyone wanted us at all. And Mr. Harlan—" Clara looked at Nate, really looked at him. "Mr. Harlan didn't poke or prod. He didn't ask how much work we could do or whether we'd cause trouble. He asked if we wanted to come with him. He gave us a choice." Her voice cracked slightly. "Nobody had ever given us a choice before." "Has he been good to you?" "He's been better than good. He sat with my little brother during nightmares. He let my sister Emmy have space when she needed it instead of forcing her to perform gratitude. He's learning how to braid Josie's hair because he noticed she missed having someone do it. He's—" Clara struggled for words. "He's trying. Every day he's trying. That's more than anyone else has ever done for us." "Thank you, Miss Dawson." Judge Crane turned to Cutter. "Your witness." Cutter stood, his smile predatory. "Miss Dawson, you seem very articulate for a 10-year-old. Almost rehearsed, one might say." "Nobody rehearsed me." "Of course not." Cutter circled closer. "Tell me, did Mr. Harlan ever explain why he really took you in? A wealthy bachelor with no family suddenly acquiring 5 children seems unusual, don't you think? He told us about his brother, Daniel, the one who died in the snow." Something flickered across Cutter's face. He hadn't expected that. "So you're aware that Mr. Harlan has a history of loss, of failure. He couldn't save his own brother, and now he's trying to ease his guilt by playing savior to you unfortunate waifs." Clara's temper flared. "That's not— Isn't it— Isn't that exactly what's happening? A damaged man using damaged children to make himself feel better?" "No." Clara's voice was steel. "What's happening is a good man trying to do the right thing, something you wouldn't understand." "I understand more than you know, child." Cutter leaned closer. "I understand that you're protecting him because you're afraid. Afraid that if you tell the truth about what really happens in that house, you'll be thrown back into the system. Afraid that—" "Nothing happens in that house." Clara was on her feet now, shaking with rage. "Nothing except kindness and patience, and people actually caring whether we live or die. You want to talk about what happens in houses? Let's talk about the placements you made. Reverend, let's talk about the Miller farm, where Johnny Thompson lost 3 fingers to frostbite because they made him sleep in the barn. Let's talk about the Hendricks family who beat Mary Sullivan so badly she couldn't walk for a week. Let's talk about—" "That's enough." Judge Crane's voice cut through her fury. "Miss Dawson, please sit down. Reverend Cutter, control your questioning, or I'll find you in contempt." Clara sank back into the chair, her whole body trembling. She'd gone too far. She'd ruined everything. But when she looked at Judge Crane, she didn't see anger. She saw something else entirely. "I'd like to hear from the other children," he said quietly. "One at a time." Sam went next. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, telling the judge about his fear of loud noises since watching their father die. About how Nate had noticed and started warning him before making sudden sounds. About feeling safe for the first time since Boston. Josie talked about books and libraries and how Nate let her read anything she wanted instead of telling her girls shouldn't fill their heads with stories. About Mrs. Whitmore teaching her to cook and Kate Mercer lending her novels about brave women who had adventures. Tommy couldn't stop crying long enough to speak coherently, but his desperate grip on his ragged blanket and the way he kept looking at Nate said more than words could. Then it was Emmy's turn. She walked to the witness chair like she was walking to an execution. Small and pale, her dark hair braided neatly, her gray eyes fixed on some distant point. "Miss Emmy," Judge Crane said gently. "Do you have a last name?" "No, sir. I was left at the orphanage without papers. They just called me Emmy." "Do you remember anything about your life before the orphanage?" Emmy was quiet for a long moment. "I remember a woman with gray eyes like mine. I think she was my mother. And I remember a man talking about mountains, about a ranch where horses ran free." Clara saw Nate stiffen. "But mostly," Emmy continued, "I remember being alone and scared and learning that if you want to survive, you can't trust anyone." "Has that changed?" Emmy looked at Nate. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Connection. "I'm learning," she said softly. "Mr. Harlan doesn't make promises he can't keep. He doesn't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. He tells the truth even when it's hard." She paused. "I trust him. I don't trust many people, but I trust him." Cutter stood for cross-examination, but his confidence had visibly cracked. "Emmy, you said you don't remember your family. Is it possible that Mr. Harlan has manipulated your memories? Convinced you to?" "Nobody manipulates me." Emmy's voice was ice. "I see things clearly, more clearly than most adults." She turned those gray eyes on Cutter. "I see you, Reverend. I see what you really are." "Ah. And what is that?" "A man who uses God's name to hurt children." Emmy didn't flinch. "I've known men like you. They smile and speak softly and pretend to care, but underneath they only care about power, about control, about making themselves feel big by making others feel small." The courtroom went absolutely silent. "I see you," Emmy repeated, "and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Judge Crane called a recess. Clara found her siblings in the hallway, huddled together like they'd done at the auction. Nate stood apart, talking quietly with Kate. His face was pale drawn. "Did I ruin it?" Clara asked, approaching him. "When I lost my temper." "You were magnificent." Nate pulled her into a hug, surprising them both. "All of you were. Whatever happens next, I'm proud of you." "What do you think will happen?" Nate didn't answer. He didn't have to. The uncertainty in his eyes said everything. They filed back into the courtroom an hour later. Judge Crane took his seat, his expression unreadable. "I've heard testimony from both sides," he said. "I've reviewed the documentation provided by Reverend Cutter and the character witnesses provided by Mr. Harlan. I've listened to 5 children speak about their experiences with remarkable honesty and courage." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Custody matters are never simple. We must balance the welfare of the children against societal norms, religious considerations, and practical concerns. Reverend Cutter raises valid points about Mr. Harlan's unconventional situation." Clara's heart sank. "However," Judge Crane leaned forward, "I am also compelled to consider the testimony of the children themselves. These are not infants incapable of understanding their circumstances. These are young people who have survived hardship that would break many adults. They have formed clear opinions about their situation, and those opinions deserve weight. He looked directly at Cutter. Furthermore, I am troubled by certain aspects of the Reverend's petition. The original court order from Judge Whitfield has been rescinded pending investigation into irregularities in his rulings. Several former placements made through the church's program have come forward with disturbing allegations that are now being examined by territorial authorities. Cutter's face went white. Mr. Harlan's methods may be unorthodox, but I find no evidence of harm to these children. On the contrary, every witness, including the children themselves, testified to improvement in their circumstances since entering his care. Judge Crane straightened in his chair. It is therefore the ruling of this court that the custody petition filed by Reverend Jonas Cutter is denied. The 5 minor children known as Clara Mae Dawson, Samuel Dawson, Josephine Bell, Thomas Reed, and Emmy shall remain in the legal guardianship of Nathaniel Harlan. Clara couldn't breathe. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am recommending that territorial authorities conduct a full investigation into the placement practices of Reverend Cutter and his associated organizations. Until such investigation is complete, all placement activities are suspended. The courtroom erupted. People were cheering, crying, shouting. Cutter was on his feet, face purple with rage, but his lawyer was already pulling him toward the door. Clara felt arms around her, her siblings, Mrs. Whitmore Kate. And then Nate was there, kneeling in front of them, his eyes bright with tears. He wasn't quite shedding. We won, Josie breathed. We actually won. We won, Nate confirmed. You're staying, all of you, forever. Tommy launched himself at Nate, wrapping small arms around his neck. Sam followed, then Josie. Even Emmy moved closer, letting herself be pulled into the embrace. Clara stood apart for just a moment watching, letting herself believe. Then Nate looked at her, held out his hand, and she took it. Welcome home, he said. For real this time. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Back at the ranch, Mrs. Whitmore had prepared a feast. Kate stayed for dinner, sitting beside Nate in a way that suggested more than neighborly concern. The townspeople who'd come to the trial drifted in and out, bringing food, offering congratulations, apologizing for years of cold shoulders and whispered judgment. Through it all, Clara watched her family. Her real family, the one they'd built from broken pieces, and felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Peace. After the younger children had been put to bed, Clara found Nate on the porch, staring out at the snow-covered land. Can't sleep, she asked. Too much to think about. She stood beside him, following his gaze. The stars were brilliant tonight, scattered across the black sky like scattered diamonds. Emmy asked me something earlier, Nate said quietly. About her past, about whether I knew anything. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell her? The truth. That I have suspicions but no proof. That my brother Daniel had a sweetheart from the Shoshone tribe. That the timing and the eyes and 100 small things add up to a possibility I can't ignore. Do you think she's really his daughter? Maybe. Probably. Nate's voice was rough. Which would make her my niece. My blood family. Does it matter? You said blood doesn't make family. It doesn't, but it matters to Emmy. She wants to belong somewhere. To someone. He finally looked at Clara. I told her that whether or not we share blood, she's mine. They're all mine. That's what matters. Clara nodded slowly. What did she say? She said that was enough. Nate almost smiled. Then she asked if she could keep sleeping in the barn sometimes, because the horses make her feel safe. Did you say yes? I said she could do whatever she needed, as long as she comes home for dinner. They stood in comfortable silence, the cold air sharp in their lungs. Kate's nice, Clara said eventually. Nate's expression flickered. She is. She looks at you like you're worth looking at. Clara. I'm just saying. Clara shrugged. We wouldn't mind. If you wanted to, you know, not be alone anymore. In that way. Nate was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick. One thing at a time. First, we get you kids settled. Get Emmy's story figured out. Get Sam comfortable enough to sleep through the night. Get Tommy to stop hiding food under his mattress. He still does that. Old habits. Nate sighed. They take time to break. But we've got time now. All the time in the world. Clara leaned against him just slightly. He put an arm around her shoulders. Thank you, she said, for fighting for us. Thank you for letting me. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. And for the first time in Clara Mae Dawson's young life, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to hope for. Spring came slow that year, melting the snow inch by stubborn inch until patches of brown earth appeared like promises. Clara marked the seasons by changes in her family. Tommy stopped hiding food under his mattress sometime in February after Mrs. Whitmore caught him, and instead of punishing him, simply started leaving extra biscuits on his nightstand. Sam began speaking in full sentences again, his nightmares fading from nightly terrors to occasional disturbances. Josie devoured every book in Nate's library and started writing stories of her own, filling notebooks with tales of brave orphans who found homes. And Emmy bloomed in ways none of them had expected. The truth about her past came out piece by piece, like a puzzle assembling itself. An old Shoshone woman who traded at the general store recognized something in Emmy's face and asked questions. Letters were sent. Answers trickled back. Daniel Harlan had indeed loved a Shoshone girl named Morning Star. They'd planned to marry in secret, run away together to California, where nobody would care about the color of their skin or the tribes of their ancestors. But Daniel died in that blizzard before they could escape. Morning Star, pregnant and alone, had been sent away by her family in shame. She'd died giving birth to a daughter with gray eyes and dark hair. That daughter had been left at an orphanage by a distant relative who couldn't afford another mouth to feed. No papers, no name, just Emmy. Nate received the news in his study alone. Clara found him there an hour later, sitting in the dark, a letter crumpled in his fist. "She's Daniel's," he said without looking up. "She's really his. Does it change anything? Everything and nothing." Nate finally raised his head. His eyes were red. "She's my blood, my brother's child, the family I thought I'd never have. She was already your family. I know. But now..." He smoothed out the letter, stared at it. "Now I can give her a name, a history, something to belong to." They told Emmy together, sitting in the kitchen with the rest of the children gathered around. Nate explained it carefully, who Daniel was, who Morning Star was, what had happened to both of them. Emmy listened without expression. When Nate finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So I'm not nobody," she said finally. "You were never nobody. But now I know where I came from, who I came from." Emmy looked at her hands, small, pale, trembling slightly. "I have a grandmother, the old woman at the store. She said she knew my mother. She wants to meet you, properly, when you're ready. I'm ready now." That meeting happened 3 days later. Clara watched from a distance as Emmy approached the old Shoshone woman, watched as weathered hands cupped Emmy's face, as tears fell from eyes that had seen too much loss. "You have her spirit," the old woman said. "Morning Star. She was fierce like you, quiet but fierce." Emmy didn't cry. She never cried. But she let herself be held, and that was more than she'd allowed anyone before. The adoption papers were filed in April. All 5 children legally and permanently bound to Nathaniel Harlan. The judge who'd saved them, Elijah Crane, officiated the ceremony himself. "Raise your right hands," he said, a hint of smile on his weathered face. 5 hands went up. Nate's went up too. "Do you, Nathaniel James Harlan, swear to provide for these children, to protect them, to guide them, to love them as your own flesh and blood for as long as you shall live?" "I do," And do you, Clara May Samuel Josephine Thomas and Emmeline, accept Nathaniel Harlan as your father, to honor him, to trust him, to allow him into your hearts as family? Clara answered first. I do. The others followed, even Tommy, who had to be prompted by Josie. Then, by the authority vested in me, I declare you a family. Legal binding and— Judge Crane's voice softened. Well deserved. Clara had thought she'd feel different after. Lighter maybe, more complete. Instead, she just felt right. Like a bone that had been out of joint for years, finally clicking back into place. Summer brought growth in more ways than one. The ranch thrived under Nate's care, but now there were small hands helping Sam learning to gentle horses, Clara riding fence lines beside Dan, even Tommy contributing by collecting eggs from the chicken coop Mrs. Whitmore had insisted they needed. Emmy spent her days between the barn and her grandmother's lodge, learning the language and traditions of her mother's people. She came home each evening with new words, new stories, new pieces of an identity she was building from the ground up. And Kate Mercer came around more and more often, her visits stretching from afternoons to evenings, to the occasional dinner that turned into the occasional overnight stay in the guest room. Clara noticed. They all noticed. But nobody said anything until Josie Blunt, as always, asked over breakfast one morning, "Are you and Miss Kate going to get married?" Nate choked on his coffee. "Josie?" Clara hissed. "What?" "It's a fair question. She's here all the time. She looks at Papa like Mama used to look at our real Papa. And last week I saw them holding hands in the barn." Kate, who'd been helping Mrs. Whitmore with the dishes, went very still. Nate set down his cup with careful precision. "That's a conversation for adults. We're part of this family too." Sam's voice was quiet but firm. "If something's changing, we should know about it." The silence stretched. Clara watched Nate and Kate exchange a look, the kind of look that held entire conversations. "You're right," Nate said finally. "You should know." He reached across the table, took Kate's hand. "Kate and I have been getting to know each other, as more than friends, more than neighbors. And," Josie pressed, "and I've asked her to marry me." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Does that mean we'll have a mama?" Kate knelt beside his chair, her expression soft. "Only if you want one. I would never try to replace anyone. But I would very much like to be part of this family, if you'll have me." Clara watched her siblings process this. Sam looked uncertain. Josie looked delighted. Tommy looked like he might cry. Emmy's expression was unreadable. "Clara." Nate's voice was careful. "You're the oldest. Your opinion matters." Clara thought about the past 6 months, about Kate teaching her to ride properly, helping with homework, sitting up with her during a nightmare when Nate was away checking cattle, about the way Kate looked at all of them, not with pity or obligation, but with genuine affection. "Do you love him?" she asked Kate directly. "Very much. Do you love us, all of us, even when we're difficult?" "Especially when you're difficult." Kate's smile was warm. "You're the most remarkable children I've ever known. I would be honored to call you mine." Clara looked at her siblings. Some unspoken vote passed between them. "Okay," she said. "Welcome to the family." The wedding was small, held at the ranch in early autumn, when the aspens turned gold. Clara served as maid of honor, a concept she'd had to have explained to her, never having attended a wedding before. Sam and Tommy stood beside Nate as groomsmen. Josie scattered flower petals down the makeshift aisle. Emmy watched from the front row, her grandmother beside her, two families merging into one. Judge Crane officiated again, joking that he was becoming the Harlan family's personal justice of the peace. Kate wore a simple cream dress that Mrs. Whitmore had helped her make. Nate wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to the custody hearing, now associated with better memories. When they exchanged vows, Clara noticed something she'd never seen before. Nate was crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "I spent 25 years thinking I didn't deserve happiness," he said, his voice rough. That losing Daniel meant I had to spend my life alone punishing myself for a mistake I couldn't undo. Then 5 children fell into my life and taught me that family isn't about blood or deserving. It's about choosing each other, every day, over and over. He looked at Kate, then at the children. I choose you, all of you, for the rest of my life. The kiss that followed made Tommy giggle and Josie sigh dreamily. Clara just smiled a real smile, the kind she'd forgotten she was capable of. The years that followed weren't always easy. There were still nightmares, Tommy's fires, Sam's factory machines, Clara's auction platforms. There were arguments and growing pains, and the inevitable friction of 7 people learning to live together. There was the terrible winter when Josie caught pneumonia, and they thought they might lose her. There was the summer Sam ran away after a fight with Nate and didn't come back for 3 days. But there was also joy. So much joy. Clara learned to read the land like Nate did, to see weather coming in the way clouds moved, to understand the rhythm of cattle and seasons. By 15, she could run the ranch operations nearly as well as Dan. By 17, she was making decisions that affected the entire property. Sam found his voice through animals. He had a gift for understanding horses that bordered on supernatural, and by 16, he was training them for ranches across the territory. The boy who'd once flinched at loud noises now stood calm in the middle of stampedes, his quiet presence settling even the most panicked creatures. Josie's stories found an audience. A publisher in Denver printed her first collection of frontier tales when she was 19, and suddenly the girl who'd devoured books was creating them. She dedicated the volume to Papa Nate, who taught me that the best stories are the ones we live. Tommy grew tall and strong, his fears slowly replaced by a fierce protectiveness of his family. He became Nate's shadow, learning everything the older man could teach, determined to carry on the Harlan legacy. And Emmy became a bridge between worlds. She split her time between the ranch and the Shoshone community, speaking both languages fluently, teaching her siblings the traditions of her mother's people while embracing the heritage of her father's. The silent girl who'd scared grown men with a kitchen knife became a young woman of remarkable grace and quiet power. Kate gave birth to twins when Clara was 16, a boy named Daniel and a girl named Rose. Suddenly, there were 2 more Harlans in the house, and the older children discovered they had opinions about diaper changing and midnight feedings. This is your fault, Clara told Nate one exhausted morning after walking Rose for 3 hours while the baby screamed. You wanted a big family. I wanted you 5. The rest was a bonus. Nate took Rose from her arms, settling the infant with practiced ease. Besides, you love them. Clara looked at her tiny half-sister finally asleep and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. Yeah, she admitted, I do. The moment Clara had been dreading came on her 18th birthday. She'd been offered a position at a law firm in Denver. Judge Crane had recommended her, said she had the sharpest mind he'd seen in 40 years on the bench. The firm would pay for her education train, her eventually let her practice alongside them. It was everything she'd never dared to dream of. It was also 800 miles from home. She found Nate in the barn, brushing down his favorite horse, the way he always did when he needed to think. You heard, she said. Kate told me. He didn't stop brushing. Denver's a good opportunity. I don't have to go. Yes, you do. Now he stopped, turned to face her. Clara, you've been taking care of other people since you were 8 years old. First your siblings, then this whole family. It's time to take care of yourself. But the ranch? Has Sam and Tommy and Emmy and Kate and me. We'll manage. His voice softened. This is what I wanted for you. All of you. Not just survival, but life. Real life with choices and opportunities and futures you get to build for yourself. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. What if I fail? Then you come home and we figure out something else. Nate crossed the barn, took her hands in his. Clara May Harlan, you are the bravest person I have ever known. You faced down men twice your size to protect your family. You testified in court against a corrupt preacher. You held this family together through things that would have broken anyone else. He squeezed her hands. Denver doesn't stand a chance against you. She left in September on a train heading east through the mountains. The whole family came to see her off, Nate and Kate, Mrs. Whitmore. Dan, all 4 siblings, even the twins, strapped to Kate's chest. Emmy's grandmother had sent a blessing bundle that now hung from Clara's carpet bag. Josie cried. Tommy tried not to, and failed. Sam hugged her so tight she thought her ribs might crack. Emmy simply pressed their foreheads together and said, "Come back strong. Come back soon." Nate was last. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I've been proud of you since the moment you slapped that farmer's hand away at the auction. But today, watching you choose your own path, choose to become something more than anyone ever expected you could be, this is the proudest I've ever been." "Papa." The word still felt strange in her mouth even after years of practice. "I wouldn't be here without you." "Yes, you would. Just somewhere different. Someone was always going to recognize what you are, Clara. I just got lucky enough to be first." The train whistle blew. Clara hugged him one last time, inhaling the scent of leather and horses, and home. Then she climbed aboard, found her seat, and watched through the window as her family grew smaller and smaller until the train rounded a bend and they disappeared. She didn't cry. She was too busy imagining the future. 20 years later, Clara Harlan stood in a courtroom in Denver facing down a factory owner who'd been working children to death in his textile mill. She thought about Tommy, who'd inherited the ranch and was raising it to new heights. About Sam, whose horse training operation spanned 3 states. About Josie, now a famous author living in New York with a husband and 4 children. About Emmy, who'd become a teacher on the reservation building bridges between cultures. She thought about Nate, older now, his hair white, his hands less steady, but his heart still the same. About Kate, grandmother to 14, still running the household with quiet efficiency. About Daniel and Rose, grown now, making their own marks on the world. She thought about a winter day 30 years ago when a 10-year-old girl had stood on an auction platform and fought grown men to keep her family together. When a broken rancher had stepped out of the crowd and changed everything with 2 words. How much she thought about what it meant to be chosen, to be wanted, to be loved not because of blood or obligation, but because someone looked at you and saw something worth saving. The factory owner's lawyer was still talking, making arguments about profit margins and economic necessity. Clara let him finish, then stood. "Your Honor, my opponent speaks of economic necessity, of the practical realities of running a business in this modern age." Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying. "But I speak for 27 children who worked 14-hour days in conditions that would shame a prison. I speak for the 3 who died because safety measures were too expensive to implement. I speak for every child who has ever been told they are less than human because they are small and powerless and have no one to fight for them." She looked at the factory owner, saw him flinch. "My client isn't just seeking damages. She's seeking recognition. Recognition that children are people, not machinery. That their lives have value beyond the labor they can provide. That in this country, in this century, we can do better than treating our most vulnerable citizens as disposable commodities." She paused, letting the words settle. "I was an orphan once, auctioned off in a Wyoming winter to whoever would pay for me. I know what it means to be seen as merchandise. And I know what it means to be saved by someone who refused to look away." Her voice strengthened. "We cannot look away. Not anymore. Not ever again." The verdict came back in her favor. It always did. Clara returned to Wyoming for Christmas that year, the same way she did every year. The train pulled into the station at dusk, and the whole family was waiting on the platform. Gray-haired Nate, leaning on Kate's arm. Tommy's children, running wild. Sam's quiet wife, holding their newborn Josie. Surrounded by her boisterous brood, Emmy, standing slightly apart, with her grandmother's blessing bundle still hanging from her belt after all these years. "You won again," Nate said as she stepped off the train. "Saw it in the papers." "I learned from the best." Flattery. But he was smiling that rare, real smile she'd learned to treasure. "Come on, Mrs. Whitmore's granddaughter made dinner. Turkey and all the fixings." They walked together toward the wagons, 3 generations of Harlans spilling across the platform. Clara watched her family, the one she'd been born into, and lost the one she'd built from broken pieces, and found siblings, the one that had grown and multiplied and spread across the country like roots seeking water. She thought about the scared little girl she'd been, the one who'd believed that hope was dangerous, that good things never lasted, that love was just another word for eventual loss. That girl had been wrong. "Papa," she said, slipping her hand into Nate's weathered one. "Yes. Thank you, for stepping forward, for not walking away." Nate squeezed her hand. His eyes, still gray, still kind, met hers. "Thank you for letting me." They climbed into the wagon surrounded by family heading home through the snow. And Clara May Harlan, who had once stood on an auction platform and whispered that nobody wanted her, finally understood the truth that had been waiting for her all along. She had never been unwanted. She had simply been waiting for the right person to see her worth. And when he came, he didn't just save her life. He gave her the courage to build one worth living. That was the gift Nathaniel Harlan had given 5 broken children on a winter day in Wyoming. Not just a home, not just a name, but the unshakable knowledge that they mattered, that they belonged, that somewhere in this vast and often cruel world there was a place for them, a family, forever.